शृण्वन्तु विश्वे अमृतस्य पुत्राः आये धमानि दिव्यानि तस्तु वेदाहमेतं पुरुषं महान्तं आदित्यवर्णं तमसः परस्तात् त्वमेव विदित्वति मृत्युमेति नैन्यपन्था विद्यते अनाय नैन्यपन्थायनाय विद्यते. Hear, O children of immortal bliss, listen, those who live in the celestial abode. I have seen that effulgent one who is beyond darkness. Knowing him alone, one can transcend death. There is no other way. There is no other way. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. This morning our subject is Reminiscences of Swami Vivekananda by Alice Hansbrough, Part 1. We are observing Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary service. First I shall tell you a brief biographical sketch of Swamiji. He was born 12 January 1863 in Calcutta. He was educated according to the British system. He was extremely brave, naughty, truthful, strong, spiritual, brilliant, a precocious boy. But he had tremendous passion for truth. I want to know the truth. So he went to different religious leaders asking the question, have you seen God? Finally, in November 1881, he met Sri Ramakrishna and asked the same question. Sri Ramakrishna said, yes, I have seen God and I can show you also. That was something for him. My goodness. Yes. I have seen God more clearly than I see you. That was the turning point of Vivekananda's life. Sri Ramakrishna trained him for 5-6 years. Then Ramakrishna passed away in 1886. Swamiji traveled all over India another few years. Then in 1893 he came to America, represented Vedanta or Hinduism at the Parliament of Religions of Chicago. Then after 3.5 years he returned to India, established Ramakrishna Mission. Then again he came to the West, lived to another 1.5 years. Total 5 years Swamiji lived in the West. And this is the second time Swamiji mainly worked in the West Coast. And during this period, Mrs. Alice Hansbrough was Swamiji's secretary. So we shall hear from her experience about Swamiji. That was the topic. As I said, Swamiji's life is very short. He died 4th July 1902 at the age of 39 years, 5 months, 24 days. He said, I shall never see 40. We generally read Swamiji's lectures, his biography. He may have many books. But we want to see his personal life. Swamiji once said to Nivedita, there's a beautiful saying, as I grow older, I find that I look more and more for greatness in little things. I want to know what a great man eats and wears, and how he speaks to his servants. Anyone will be great in a great position. Even the coward will grow brave in the glare of the footlights. More and more, the true greatness seems to me that of the worm doing its duty silently, steadily, from moment to moment and hour to hour. The older I grow, the more seems to me to lie in manliness. This is my new gospel. It is extremely important. We want to see that person's personal life. Sometimes we see a speaker comes and charms people, but you do not know how awful that man is, how he behaves his wife and children and other members. His character may not be very good, but he will charm you. It is extremely important to know the personal life. There is a beautiful story about Ramayana. When Sita was kidnapped, Rama was very much depressed, crying. Both Rama and Lakshmana came near the lake Pampa, a lake, big lake. He saw a crane seated on the shore of that lake, very calm, very majestic. Swamiji was telling Lakshmana, look, that crane has so much peace and serenity. And look how restless and painful I am. I have no peace. Immediately a fish raised his head from the lake and said to Rama, "Oh Rama, you were talking about that fish, that crane? You do not know that crane's character. I live with him. He ate my wife, he ate my children, now day and night he is meditating on me." That fish was telling Rama, now that crane wants to eat me. And you are telling that he is very good. It's a beautiful saying, Sahavase vijaniyat charitram savavasinam. You can know the character of a person if you live with that person. So we really want to know about Swamiji's personal life. Another thing I really like to know, that how his temper. You know, some people we see very angry, temper tantrum, very selfish, no love for others, quarrelsome. But we see in this society, oh, he was showing your smiling face. You do not know the background of that person. That we want to see. Personal life. The person who is great, he is great in every sphere. If you can go to his room, you can see his bed, his other belongings, his bathroom, how he cooks, how he puts the dishes in the dishwasher. That person's everything should be very precise, very artistic. Some people I have seen very learned, but but they do not have very common sense. That we can see in Swamiji's life. Strong common sense. Feeling, love. Whatever he does, just right. That is the way Swamiji defined religion. Religion is the manifestation of perfection already in human beings. He is perfect in every respect. Swamiji was a jnani, he was a yogi, he was a worker, he was a devotee, he was a musician, he is a debater, he is a speaker. Whatever respect, he is a poet, he is an orator. In every respect, that person is perfect. That we want to see in his personal life. Perfect. Whatever he does, just right. That is called true religion. When he translated the highest teachings in his day-to-day life. That we want to see. I remember I met Miss Catherine Whitmarsh, who met Swamiji when she was a little girl in Ridgely in 1899 summer. She told me, Swami, my mother used to fix dinner for Swamiji. And she told me, Swamiji is the most delightful person in the dinner table. He would make fun, jokes, and eat, and he was very positive, wise, loving, joyful. You know, people love to have the company of those people, those who are positive, joyful, happy. We avoid those people who are selfish, quarrelsome, angry, negative attitude. We avoid those people. And those people you will see always lonely, friendless. I do not like to live with that person. Always quarrelsome, unpredictable. That we see in Swamiji. He's a delightful person. Everybody wants his company. That Prasanna told me that Swamiji used to give some pennies to us, and we, my brother and myself, we used to run in Ridgely. It is a big property of Mr. Leggett. During his second visit, Swamiji was in California most of the time. He came to Los Angeles 3rd December 1899. Till February 20, he was in Southern California. Then in Northern California, February 22 to May 29. And then in Pasadena with the Mitch sisters, about them I am going to tell you. Swamiji stayed with them for a month. And she will relate to us about Swamiji's personal life. I remember when I first came to Hollywood in 1971, on 1st of January, I wanted to have a retreat in Swamiji's house. That house where Swamiji lived now belonged to the property of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. 309 Monterey Road, South Pasadena. It is a small Victorian house. Anyhow, that house is now the historical landmark because Swamiji lived there. I remember it was 1st of January, we used to watch the parade of the Rose Bowl. Then the other brahmacharis and young boys used to watch football. And I used to cook. I used to cook khichdi and other things. And then at 4 o'clock, meditation for 4 to 5. Then singing, chanting. Then in the evening, we had dinner. And then we used to read Swamiji's stay in that house. It was a very beautiful day. The 1st January we started in such a beautiful way, I cannot tell you. Very joyful. Now, the reminiscences which I am going to talk to you, Mrs. Hansbrough, there is a story behind this reminiscences, how I came to know about it. It was in 1970, I was in Mayabhuti. Mrs. Mary Louise Burke wrote the book, big volume, Vivekananda in California. And the manuscript was giving to me to give a reading before it will go to the printer. So I was reading, I was so inspired and impressed. So I started to write some pertinent portions from that manuscript in my diary. Then the book was out later in a different name, Swami Vivekananda in West New Discoveries, volume 5 and 6. So when there I found the reference of Mrs. Alice Hansbrough's Reminiscences about Swamiji. Gargi, Mary Louise Burke, took different experts from that Reminiscences and used in her book. So do you know what happened? I asked Swami Prabhudanandaji, Maharaj, could I have that full manuscript? He could not give me immediately, but anyhow, in 2004 or 5, I got it. He gave me 84 pages cycle-style manuscript from their archives. Then I asked one of our devotees to type for me, and then we edited and rearranged. And it was published serially in the Prabuddha Bharata in February 2007 to July 2007, in 6 issues. These are the things. So I was very impressed. Then I started to translate the whole thing into Bengali. And it also came serially in Udbodhan magazine. It was in March 1941. March 1941. Swami Ashokananda, who was the head of the Vedanta Society of Northern California, interviewed Mrs. Hansbrough. She was then 75 years old, living with her daughter in Bay Area. He asked that, Mrs. Hansbrough, I'd like to interview you. You know Swamiji so closely, all this long time when Swamiji was in Northern California, in South and Northern California. So will you be able to, happy to share your reminiscences to us? Well, of course. Please come to my home. The Swami went with Mr. Clifton, who later became Swami Chidrupananda, to her home and interviewed her. Very interesting. It was 541 Avila Street, Marina Parkway, San Francisco Bay. That was her daughter's house. Mrs. Hansbrough was 75 years old, but still was blessed with keen intellect, keen intelligence, and a ready humor, which must surely have endeared her to Swamiji. She was slight and below medium height, dignified, and unvaryingly good-natured in her manner, and possessed of a natural peacefulness which communicated itself to others. Her memory was clear, and her conversation, therefore, filled with interesting details. Please tell me, how did you come to know about Swamiji first in your life? She says it was in 1897. I was studying some metaphysics and theosophy with my friends in San Francisco. And there that our teacher quoted Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. You see, she had a daughter named Dorothy, and her husband disappeared. So she went to Alaska. 2 years she lived in Alaska. So when she was going by boat from San Francisco to Alaska, her friends said that it was a long journey by boat. Do you like to have some presents? Well, I like to have a copy of Raja Yoga. So my friends went to a bookshop and asked that book. The owner of the shop told, That book does not come in a single way. It comes with a package. Karma Yoga and Raja Yoga, Vivekananda together. So you'll have to buy both. So the friends bought the both copies and gave to me. And during this long journey, I read and read and read that Raja Yoga first. And then I read Karma Yoga. 2 years I read. She says, I remember I used to read for a while and the thought would come to me. What marvelous thoughts these are. I would hold the place with my finger, close the book, and shut my eyes and think, what a wonderful man he must be who wrote these words. And I would try to form a picture in my mind of what he looked like. I met a man in Alaska who was interested in theosophy, and we used to talk about Swamiji. Then after I returned from Alaska, I came to San Francisco first and then Los Angeles, November 23rd, 1899. Swamiji arrived in Los Angeles, 3rd December, 1899. What happened? Well, how do you know? How did you come to Swamiji first time? Well, before I tell you, let me give you a little background. Miss Josephine MacLeod's brother was suffering from tuberculosis in Arizona. And he was went to Los Angeles with his partner's house, and his wife was treating him. And his wife wrote to Miss MacLeod there in the East Coast, New York, that if your brother is dying, if you want to see, please come. So MacLeod went to that home in Los Angeles. I went there and took some pictures some years ago in Los Angeles. But that old house is gone, the new homes have come out there. Then he went to Swamiji's house, MacLeod went to Swamiji's house and saw a big pictures. Chicago Parliament pictures was in his room, near his bed. So MacLeod was wondering, my goodness, Swamiji's picture is here? The Swamiji, MacLeod asked the house lady, Mrs. Blodgett, S.K. Blodgett, how do you know about this man? Well, I was in Parliamentary Relations in Chicago in 1893. And I met this man. He lectured. And do you know what? After the lecture, I found all young girls and men, women are running to shake hands with him. Then seeing these young women rushing to a Swamiji, I said, if you can overcome the onslaught of these American women, you are God. Swamiji was God. And that picture was there. Then Tanchin said, Miss Josephine MacLeod, you know, this person is now staying in our guest in Ridgely, in New York. Do you want him to be your guest? Well, of course, I like to have him in my guest. That is the way Swamiji came from the East Coast to the West Coast and just stayed with Mrs. Blodgett. I just give you a little background so that when we shall discuss these things, you will get a better picture. Then Swami Ashokananda was interviewing. When did you meet the first time with Swamiji? Well, it was 8 December 1899. My sister Helen came home that evening and said, who do you know think is going to speak in Los Angeles tonight? Swami Vivekananda. All during the 2 years I had been reading his books in Alaska, I had never expected to see him. Well, we rushed through dinner, made up a party, and went in. The lecture was at 8 o'clock. Blanchard Hall was on Broadway. I was there. I knew that place. between 8th and Hill Street. I remember Hill Street. The audience was between 600 to 800 people, and everyone was enchanted with Swamiji. This was the first lecture in California, and the subject was Vedanta philosophy. This lecture Swamiji gave in Brooklyn, in New York, and the Professor Baumgart wanted that he would give the same lecture here. Swamiji said, no, it cannot be. I speak extempore. Some points may be there, but I speak differently. I have no notes. It comes from my mind. So that was the lecture. How was Swamiji dressed? Swami Ashokananda asked. He wore a yellow robe and turban. Yellow? Well, a light orange. A little lighter than the robe you use, Mrs. Hansbrough replied. And how did he look? His complexion was lighter than all the Swamis here today, except Swami Devatmananda, who was in Portland, Oregon. Mrs. Hansbrough said his hair was black, very black, with not one gray hair. A lady once asked him later if the Hindus' hair ever turned gray. How did he impress you? Swami Ashokananda then asked. I got the same impression I had previously had of him. That is, he was a most impressive personality. You know, you have told me that it is impossible to get an impression of a personality from an individual's writings. But I felt that I had sensed Swamiji's personality from his books, and the impression was verified when I heard him speak. And once you see it, you will never forget that person in your life. His eyes, captivating eyes, very large, protruding eyes. If you read his reminiscences, you will find everybody mentions about his eyes. Lotus eyes, yogi's eyes. How was his voice? Swami Ashokananda asked. His voice, I should say, was baritone, certainly near to bass than tenor, and it was the most musical voice I have ever heard. At the end of the lecture, he closed with the chant, I am existence absolute, knowledge absolute, bliss absolute. Everyone was enchanted with his talk. Whenever he quoted from Sanskrit, he would chant the quotation. Then he would actually chant. Then he would give translation in English. Well, after the lecture, we all, the group, we went, our party rushed to that podium, near the podium where Swamiji was, and wanted to have an interview. Then first Professor Baumgart referred to Miss MacLeod, but he is the host. So we went to MacLeod, and Miss MacLeod said, really you want to see him? But yes. Well, I will introduce you to the Swami's hostess. So he went to her. Then we made a date when he will see us. His second lecture was December 12, was also arranged by the Academy of Sciences. But this was held in the Congregational Church and was free, whereas tickets had been required for the first one. The subject was the building of the cosmos. Swamiji gave several lectures in Shakespeare Club in Pasadena. Some beautiful lectures came from that hall. The director of that hall was very devoted to Swamiji. Swami Ashokananda however, wrote that he was not happy there. He was telling them, he he was staying with the director of the Shakespeare Club. From there, Swamiji moved. Swamiji told these three sisters that I am not happy in this place. It's very uncomfortable. You see, Miss Alice Hansbrough, I did not tell about her family. Mrs. Wyckoff, Carrie Wyckoff, her husband died, had a son named Ralph. Second sister is Alice. Her husband disappeared, had a daughter. Third sister was Helen, unmarried school teacher. And they had a brother, lived in one house. That is the background of this family. Very prestigious people. But they are not very rich. The president of the Shakespeare Club invited Swamiji to live with her. Her name is Emmeline Bowler. That woman, you see, has motive. He was thinking, this man is brilliant, I shall make some money arranging his lectures. If you ticket, $1 if you want to hear the lecture at that time. So she was very motivated. Then Swamiji did not like that somebody should do business, and use him in that way. The Pasadena Vedanta Society was formed, but it did not last. Then when Mrs. Hansbrough took over the responsibility and arrangement of lectures of Swamiji, Mrs. Bowler was very unhappy because he could not make money. Then she was asking Alice, how much are you getting for this? I told her the truth, the privilege of paying for the halls. And we are not wealthy people, Mrs. Bowler. She was a very famous woman in the society. But we are poor people. We do not make money from this person. After the second lecture, as I mentioned, Miss MacLeod had arranged for us to call on him at Mrs. Blodgett's home, and my sister Helen and I went in the morning. He was dressed to receive us in the long knee-length coat we see in the picture, where he stands with Sister Lolita. He wore a kind of minister's collar with what has been clerical vest, and his hair was covered by a black turban, which rolled back something like those the women wear here now. This was the dress he always wore on the street. Then Swamiji talked to these two sisters, Hansbrough and Helen. I can only describe myself as enchanted by him. As I mentioned, this was my feeling from his books before I ever saw him. And the feeling has stayed with me throughout my life. And what did he talk about with you at this first meeting? The conversation was only general. He was rather shy and reserved in manner, as I remember. He asked how long he expected to stay in Los Angeles, and he replied that he did not know. Naturally, with such an offer, if we care to arrange a class, Mrs. Hansbrough says, if we arrange a class, will you be able to come to give a talk to our group? Naturally, with such an offer, we eagerly went about getting a class together. So in the Blanchard building, on December 19, there are 3 meetings over a period of a week. They started, these two girls, 3 lectures, 50 cents each talk. But if you pay $1, then you can attend 3 talks. You see, in America, everything goes by discount. We had 3 rooms in the Blanchard building, which opened into one another. The arrangement was not very satisfactory, especially since the attendance was running between 150 to 200. About money affair, he was telling Swamiji was completely indifferent. We used to take care of his money, income, everything, bank. He did not touch money. But we used to send the money to India according to Swamiji's direction for his work. Do you remember the topics of the classes, of the name of any book he used? The Swami asked. No, Mrs. Hansbrough replied. But the classes are taken down in shorthand. Somewhere later printed in Prabuddha Bharata. Sister Nivedita took those things and edited. And we used some stenographer at that time, no tape recorder or any voice collection. This was Miss McClary. On another occasion, they engaged this girl to write down Swamiji's speech, stenographer. And this stenographer, she was a very innocent woman, asked, Swami, we hear that in America, in India, children are thrown into the mouth of the crocodile. They are so they're heathens, you see. They live in a dark age. Swamiji says, yes, madam, I only escaped. That is the reason I came in front of you. Another occasion says, Swami, we hear the girls are thrown into the mouth of the crocodile. Of course. Girls' bodies are so soft, crocodiles eat them. Nowadays in India, men are producing the children. All women are gone. He used to give all kinds of regiment answers to these people. Very interesting. Nowadays, all babies are born of men. Miss McClary hung her head. Swamiji said, Madam, I don't blame you. I would too, if I had asked such a question. Then after one lecture, during the questions and answer class, one gentleman, his name is Burnsby, Mr. Burnsby. Swamiji, you say in Vedanta, says Brahman, everything is one, one, one. Then what is the difference between a human body and a cabbage? Both are the same. Swamiji says, of course, you take a knife and punch into your body and then you will see the difference. Do you know what does it mean? If you have really the knowledge of Brahman, you will not see the difference between the cabbage and the body. If you punch it with a knife, you will not feel it. Because you have no body idea, you are the Atman. Swamiji's answer was so beautiful. Stick a knife into your leg and you will see the line of demarcation. On another occasion, a woman asked, who supported all the monks in India? The women, madam, Swamiji replied, the same as in your country. And the monks are vagabonds. Who feed these monks? They do not work. And when was it that you asked him to visit you? I think it was in Blodgett's home once when Helen and I were together. Miss Hansbrough smiled. Sometimes before, as a matter of fact, before we had been met Swamiji, though it was after his second lecture, I one day said to my sisters, "Do you know, I think Swami Vivekananda wants to come to visit us." My sister thought I was crazy. However, I defended my thought by pointing out that the Swami was not well and that he might find our home restful. We are then living at 309 Monterey Road in Lincoln Park. You know, he was Swamiji's Nvara Brahman. But he was working so hard, sometimes body sometimes fails, sickness comes. At that time, do you know, one should look after that body, because if you serve that body, you will get all virtues. So they are thinking, they do not know all those things. They are thinking that Swamiji needs some rest. The person you really love, you want to serve that person. I think Swamiji needs some rest. What a beautiful feeling. We are then living there at Monterey Park. The property and the house are still standing. As I said, it is now under the Vedanta Society of Southern California. Did he look unwell? Would anyone know from his appearance that he was ill? Swami Ashokananda asked. Oh no, Mrs. Hansbrough told him. He always looked bright, especially when he was particularly interested in something. Then his eyes actually sparkled. When he declined my invitation to visit us, he was very gracious. I had explained that our home was very unpretentious, but that we would be happy to have him with us. He smiled and said, I do not need luxury, and explained that he was comfortably situated at Mrs. Blodgett. Then we invited him, Swamiji, at the Christmas time, will you come to our home for a dinner? Swamiji accepted my invitation. Then Swamiji said, Miss MacLeod, Joe also will go with me. Well, it will be fine, please come. It was an hour ride on the electric train for them to reach our home. The train stopped just at the corner, and then they had only a few steps to our door. We received him. The tall window, he entered in our living room. The tall windows looked out through the trees in our garden. Swamiji walked to one of them and stood for some minutes looking out with the white curtains framing him against the sunlight. Then he turned and spoke, answering again the question I had asked him at Mrs. Blodgett. Yes, he said, I will come to visit you. Then again, you see, the American people, they are very bad. They talk about dress, but what kind of clothing Swamiji had when he came to our home. Then he wanted to come right away. And he soon said, soon did. He had but one trunk, but he had many clothes, for he was always well dressed when he went out or met strangers. At home he cared little for his dress. He was most casual about it. Once while my nephew Ralph was blacking his shoes, he remarked, You know, Ralph, this fine lady business is a nuisance. He knew what was expected of him in public. When Mrs. Bowler had invited him to speak in Pasadena, she had especially asked that he must wear the turban. Do you have to wear the turban? I asked him, for by that time he had given it up. Don't you understand? He said, she wants the whole show. Swamiji's turban, basically. Unusual, gorgeous. tell us more about how Swamiji interaction with the people before lecture and after lecture. In connection with the work, I always saw him before and after the lectures and classes. I remembered one evening when we were getting home after a lecture, he asked me how I had liked it. He had been very outspoken that evening in criticism of the West. And I said that I had enjoyed the lecture but feared that he sometimes antagonized his audience. He smiled and said, "Madam, don't worry, I cleared the whole hall in New York." It happened. When he was lecturing on my master, many people left the hall. He attacked the materialistic outlook of the Western people. Enjoyment. That will never bring peace to you. In the next day, in the New York Times, the report came. Then he started to cry. Why? Because my guru never criticized anybody, but I criticize these American people because they are this hedonistic outlook. I think the finest gesture I ever saw him make, Mrs. Hansbrough went on, was in connection with the rumor of a scandal which arose about him while he was in Los Angeles. Scandal, missionary people. They tried to disturb his work. Mr. Bungert, the professor, who was closely introducing all these lectures, he said, "Swamiji, we hear all these things." Finally he said, "Well, what I am is written on my brow. If you can read it, you are blessed. If you cannot, the loss is yours, not mine." Before that, the American devotees asked Swamiji to defend. Oh no, monks do not defend. Truth alone triumphs. You will have to understand that why is it going on. The missionaries, when Swamiji spoke and the missionary people's income dropped and they became furious. They wanted to kill him. In Detroit, they put poison in his coffee. And Sri Ramakrishna appeared before him and said, "Don't drink, there is a poison." We shall read it there, Mr. Leggett used to give $10,000 every year to these missionary people. But the day he met Swamiji, he did not give a single penny to the missionaries. So they became furious. The conversation then turned once more to Swami Vivekananda's lecture, and Swami Ashokananda asked where Swamiji gave Christ the Messenger that lecture. It was in Pines Hall, Mrs. Hansbrough told. The original title of the lecture, was The Message of Christ to the World. It is a beautiful lecture. It is in Complete Was, Volume 4, Christ the Messenger. Miss MacLeod attended the lecture, but I saw a halo behind Swamiji when he was lecturing. That's a beautiful lecture. There's a small booklet we have, Christ the Messenger. Swamiji was introduced by John Smith, a physician who greatly admired Swamiji. The lecture drew a tremendous crowd. More than 100 people were turned away. The Mr. Blanchard, for whom the hall where Swamiji gave his first lecture was named, was present at this time. And seeing the size of the audience, and he thought that I can make some money using this person. So he came to this Mr. Blanchard. Still that Blanchard Hall is there in Los Angeles, downtown. Well, he came and asked him, can I arrange some lectures of him in my hall? Well, I am not the responsible, I am not the manager. You go to that woman, Miss MacLeod. MacLeod did not say anything. But do you know what? That man went on the podium and announced, next Sunday Swami Vivekananda will speak here. But Swamiji heard it, and then he was saying, what? Without taking my permission, this person announced? Swamiji was mad at him. The admission will be 10 cents. Mind you, there had been no admission charge on this lecture. When Swamiji heard this announcement, he turned and asked, who gave the man permission to make it? Somehow Miss MacLeod crawled out of it, and Swamiji turned on me. He was thoroughly annoyed and looked quite angry. He said, the man should not have been allowed to make such an announcement, and he could not be persuaded to give the lecture at Blanchard Hall. He pointed out that he had no end of trouble trying to get rid of people who wanted to make money out of him. We learned later that on the following Sunday, more than 100 people went to Blanchard Hall nevertheless and waited on the steps. Swamiji was very popular, extremely popular. And after some lectures in Pasadena, I told Swamiji, I think he would like to go on to San Francisco. His eyes lighted up, as they always did when he was particularly interested in something. And he answered, yes, of course I would. My sisters discouraged me. He said, you do not have capacity to arrange Swamiji's lectures in San Francisco. But she had some friends there. She knew some friends in the Home of Truth. So anyhow, you were not so smart and socially inclined. The other two sisters were telling Alice. I was taken a little surprised, and I had less abandoned the thought. When I could go if you wanted me to, I answered. He seemed to have sensed that I had been discouraged from the plan by my sister's opposition. When once you considered an action, he said, do you let anyone dissuade you? Consult your heart, not others, and then follow its dictates. Not long after, a letter from Dr. Benjamin B. Fay, Unitarian Church in Oakland, inviting Swamiji to go there. That Unitarian Church is still there. I lectured there 2 years ago. The Unitarian Church in Oakland. This gentleman was very jealous of Swamiji. He was in Parliament of Religions in Chicago and heard Swamiji's lectures. And again, he wanted to use Swamiji, taking him so that he can gather more people, make some more money. My words are the spirit, and they are like their life. And it's generous fire in the minds of the people. There he spoke the ideal of universal religion. Sunday, March 23, 1941. I have been all 4 weeks. It was in Pasadena House, in our house, Swamiji stayed 4 weeks. Late January till it was February 21st. Did he ever express any opinion about Los Angeles? It has an atmosphere like India. It is restful, yes. And did you have many conversation with him while he was in your home? The Swami asked. Oh yes, usually there in the evening, every night, we would sit after dinner was over, and he would talk on many subjects, philosophy, science, our national development. My goodness, national development, United States. Yes, Mrs. Hansbrough answered. He was very much interested in all phases of our national life, but he did not like to see the great concentration on material affairs. Swamiji said that our civilization would fall within 50 years if we did not spiritualize it. That he mentioned in 1897. The whole world is now waiting on the edge of a volcano. Any moment it may erupt. And that happened. Look, within 50 years, 2 great world wars. 1914 to 1919, again 1939 to 1945. 2 world wars happened. Because of this materialistic and greed brought wars and so much destruction, so many people died. Material values. How long would this conversation last in the evening? He would talk as long as you wanted him to. Mrs. Hansbrough says, though actually it was never later than around 10 or 11 o'clock. And did he have a room to himself in your house? Oh yes, I have a picture of your house there here. Oh no, that is not the house. The room was in the back. East, that is south. Southeast corner, that is Swamiji's room. And in the upstairs, in the attic, that Ralph and Dorothy used to live in the attic. And the 3 sisters, they used to live in one room, which is just like hospital size of bed, you know, one after another. See, he mentioned about that. I remember that house very well. That is the way we used to live. And there is one bathroom for Swamiji. And then on the 2nd floor. Mrs. Hansbrough smiled. No, he replied, though he was very careful about his dress when he went out, but he was very careless about at home. If somebody says that, Swami, if I remember, he himself remarked about it one Sunday morning, why should I be careful of my dress at home? I don't want to get married. Swamiji was so funny. Slippers, black hair. He would have some kind of black hair, not yet combed. You know, when he used to come from sleep, my bath, his hair is. You have seen some pictures in San Francisco, like a prince, overwhelming fire. So, way be here. I remember the robe, he had many writers. It was a black and white tweed. You know, he was talking about dress. About here. I shall make a remark. What happened when Swamiji returned in 1900, December, to India, that hair was there. The day Swamiji arrived in Belur Math, he asked the barber to come and shave. The barber came and shaved the all hair, and the barber was throwing away the hair in a dump. Swamiji looked and said, shh. One day, to have a hair of Vivekananda, people will cry, will clamor to get a hair of Vivekananda, and you are throwing away. Miss Swami Ashokananda asked, perhaps you are responsible for that Swamiji's long hair. She smiled, yes. Swamiji looked beautiful with his long hair, looks like a prince. Mrs. Hansbrough smiled assent. Swamiji himself did not object. In fact, he appreciated the value that its beauty lent to his appearance. He actually remarked once, when we were discussing it, beauty has its value. He was wholly devoid of self-consciousness. It happened, another story I shall tell you. It was in New York. Swamiji, on Sundays, he used to go to Miss Waldo's house in Brooklyn for dinner. After giving lecture, he used to go there. And one day, Swamiji was pacing on the living room and standing in front of the mirror and looking himself. The Mrs. Waldo is thinking, perhaps Swamiji is the most egotistic person. Swamiji read her mind. Then when he came and said, you know, Swamiji used to call her Emily. You know Emily? When I was standing in front of the mirror, I identify myself. The moment I leave the mirror, I feel that I have no body. I'm bodiless. We know we have never heard such thing. No body consciousness, nor a Brahman. At breakfast, would be at 7:30 or in order to accommodate Helen, she was working, so she left early, and Ralph used to go to school. And what he did in the breakfast? Grapefruit, orange or grapefruit juice, and he liked poached eggs. He would have toast and coffee usually. Did he like coffee with cream? Oh yes. He took coffee with cream and sugar. And how big a breakfast would be eat? Moderate. Usually he took 2 eggs, 2 pieces of toast, 1 cup of coffee. Once I offered third cup, Swamiji agreed and said, all right, woman's business is to tempt man, so I am going to have a coffee. In Hollywood, you see, in Sister Lolita used to serve breakfast. That tradition is still going on in Hollywood. First, fruit juice, then little cereal, then 2 pieces of toast, then 2 poached eggs, then 1 cup of coffee. Then we used to offer cigarettes to Swamiji. When all devotees bring all fancy best cigarettes. On Swamiji's birthday, we offer cigarette to Swamiji. So I used to light the cigarette, and when it is lighted, we used to put near the Swamiji's picture as if he is smoking. I remember one nun came and was telling me, Swami, could I have a little cigarette prasad? I told him, yes, I can give you 1 pack, but on condition. You'll have to meditate whole night. Swamiji used to meditate, so you will have to meditate whole night, then I shall give you 1 pack cigarette. Breakfast would usually last about an hour, but we never had it. Ralph will be at school at 8 or 8:30. Dorothy was a little girl, she used to move around, and Swamiji used to play with them, ring around the rosy. I do not know this American game. Ring around the rosy. And other games, Swamiji used to play with these little girls. He was much interested in the problem of child training, and he often talked of it. He did not believe in punishment. It had never helped him, he said, and I would never do anything to make a child afraid. You know, sometimes we tell some stories, ghost stories, or things, you frighten the children. Swamiji was very much against it. Never put fear in the minds of these little children. Well, now, Swamiji have the classes in the meetings in the morning. Swami Ashokananda, yes, he was having both morning lectures and classes in Los Angeles and Pasadena while he was with us. Mrs. Hansbrough replied, they would start usually at 10:30 or 11, and he would leave the house at about 10. What would Swamiji wear at the meeting? Would he wear his robe? No, he wore the black garment we see in several of the pictures of him, something like a clerical frock, but looser. Sometimes it was not too warm, he would wear his overcoat over this. He would take the Gerua robe and turban in a suitcase and put them on when he arrived at the meeting place. Anyhow, my time is over, otherwise I have many things to talk. Anyhow, I shall give another lecture, or maybe one, perhaps 1 lecture will be enough, or 2, I don't know. So, there are so many things we can learn about Swamiji. How can we have his company now? That is the thing I sometimes imagine. Do you know what? Is Swamiji gone? We can create these reminiscences I love. because it helps me to imagine that Swamiji is still with us. We can love him, we can serve him. We can hear his voice if we meditate on him. Thank you. Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Surai Satchit Sukha Sarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. I bow down to Swami Vivekananda, who is the king among the yogis, who is the hero among human beings, who is the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute, and was born to remove the sufferings of humanity. We bow down to him again and again. Om Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace be unto all. This week we shall surprise putting it is Swamiji's birthday. And next Sunday is Swami Premananda's birthday. And our bulletin is out, please pick it up. And February bulletin will be out soon.